spook easily stung.
Have you ever explored the depths of fear? Have you ever wondered what depravity dwells within the imagination of a storyteller that prompts them to exhume horrors untold and expose those horrors to unsuspecting audiences? Some are repulsed, and some are shaken. However, there are those who are invigorated. So to those demented souls, we invite you to journey inward into the dark bowels of human imagination. Press play, and you will discover what's in the podcast.
Cathy was 9 years old when she became an unholy terror. Cathy's Curse.
And we are back for a different kind of edition of What's in the Podcast. This time around, we are not doing a live commentary. This time we are just going to do a spotlight review on a particularly divinely decadent, obscure little ditty made in conjunction between France and Canada. Definitely not the usual ones trotted out through the studio system, so I believe we will be safe there and trying to abide by the Writers Guild / Screen Actors Strike. Seriously, support that shit. But here, today, now, I am bringing on the legend, the wonderful, the inimitable, a very, very dear friend of yours and mine. I say yours if you are on the Mutant Fam. You are obligated to be friends with this individual. The wonderful Ruby Tombsday. Thank you so much. Insert applause soundbite.
Thank you. Hello, children.
Hello to you as well, and I'm very glad to see you still up and running. We were sad about the demise of Stream Lounge, but from what I hear, you got kicked up on a new platform recently, Scener, I think it's called.
Yes, we're going to be on Scener going forward, and we'll be able to do everything, just about everything we were able to do on Stream Lounge, plus some additional things. So we'll be a little different going on. Our first show is going to be Saturday night. We're doing Unwelcome, so looking forward to that one.
I love Unwelcome. Yeah, I just reviewed that one. We'll see how the year pans out, but that one might have creeped into my top of the year. That one I really enjoyed. But for now, we are veering into the realm of Exorcist knockoff territory with Cathy's Curse, which was directed by Eddie Madelon. From what in my research, this was his English-speaking debut. He was dominantly a French director, judging by his IMDb resume, professing in nudie cuties, to say the least, or possibly even porn. So this was his first time doing an English-speaking film. So, but before we even get into that, for those unacquainted, tell us your origin story.
Oddly enough, Cathy's Curse kind of was the start for me. It was the first horror movie I saw in a theater. I saw this as the opening film in a 3-film $1 triple feature. We saw this with such masterpieces as Hercules with Lou Ferrigno and Ator the Fighting. Yeah, Ator the Fighting Eagle. And my mother and my father both were very, very anti-horror film growing up, so they just weren't allowed in my house. So I grew up largely without them. And this, we went for the last 2 films in this $1 triple feature. So if you're going, we'll sit whatever the beginning is, it doesn't really matter to us, and then we'll watch the other 2 movies. And this was the most fun we had all night. So I was getting away with seeing a horror movie with my father, which is the only time this ever happened, period, in my life. And this movie, Dad and I were the only ones in the theater laughing.
I love being the only one in the theater laughing.
This definitely did that.
That's wonderful that this movie that we are discussing today was at the epicenter, the seed that grew to a glorious whole with you. So so I will let you do the honors. Give us a synopsis of Cathy's Curse.
Okay, well, the thing about this is it's going to sound like I'm describing half a dozen other movies that all have similar concept. There's a lot borrowed here. In a nutshell, preferably chestnut, black walnut if you got it. The movie is the story of a man-hating husband who comes home to find his daughter abandoned and his wife and son run off. He expresses his disgust. They hop in a car. They take off. He dodges a white rabbit and drives the car into a field. It catches fire. They die. Fill in the blank years later. It's not entirely clear how long time passes. Another family moves in, and with a daughter the same age as the young girl Laura, who passed away in the car crash, and things start to happen to the young girl, and at that point becomes very much an Exorcist or various almost generic possession story. Equal doses, I feel, of 60s era Hammer, Exorcist, and Omen, but just not necessarily in a great way.
Okay. Did a better job than me. So when you recommended this one to me, so what was it that tickled you when you initially saw it? And I got to ask, how long had it been since the last time you watched it versus watching it now in preparation for this?
What tickled me about it in the theater was the fact that editing was something that happens to other movies.
Didn't happen here.
It did not. It did not. They're trying to accomplish true cinema and pathos with lighting that just doesn't come off. Mm-hmm. So, and the effects are, well, Saturday Night Horror host?
Possibly.
That's what tickled about me in the theater. And then I spent years trying to tell people that this movie existed. My dad remembers the existence of this film. And I'm telling people things about it, and they're going, that can't possibly have been a thing. It never would have made the screen. And I'm going, you gotta believe me, this movie happened. And then finally, sometime around 2016, 2017, we stumbled across it somewhere on a compilation of 25 horror movies for $5, one of these types of DVDs, where they pull most of it out with Ray Bradbury theater episodes. Mm-hmm. So I introduced my Crow's Kill and Nerd Wife both to it. Like, see, it's true.
It's true.
And I think I've watched it once since my show started in 2020. Okay. I don't think that I'd seen it prior to that until today, when I said I want to be hot, fresh out of this thing when we get a chance on the podcast today.
You want to be at the forefront. You want to be at the forefront of the people who champion this movie, to put it in the same camp as like stuff like The Mutilator or anything that's like that movie that would have been brushed off as knockoff direct. But you're like, no, this movie deserves that to be just as embraced as a sublime trashterpiece as it was always destined to be.
This is my thing / Sledgehammer. This is that film for me, and I just love the fact that it's out there on digital media now, so I can take this movie and rub people's faces in it.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. They said I was bad, but who's bad?
Well, I'm glad you brought this one to me, because I immediately in my head was like, if Ruby is telling me about this movie and is actually favoring watching this one over her favorite Robo Vampire, I'm like, that is something that requires attention. So as soon as I did, I jumped at this movie. This movie already had me from the get-go, and it was, and I love that you mentioned the editing, because it was the editing was the first thing I noticed. And I always say, if I notice the editing is not great, then the editing really isn't that great. Because in that initial scene in your synopsis, where the father confronts the daughter asking, where are they? Or Lauren, I believe her name is Laura. Okay.
And the reason the six of clear is my two youngest sisters are Laura and Kathy.
Oh, we'll see. There you go. Nah, that's too coincidental. Or, but
77. Let's do the math.
yeah, maybe. So, but one thing that cracked me up is that there's a wide of him, lowering himself down to talk with Laura, but then there's a random wide or a random up close where it's very clearly he's standing, and even more so, the dialogue flow just jerks into "Your mother's a bitch," and we have to. I was like, whoa, did we miss some pages here?
It's like his second line in the film, and he only gets like 4.
Immediately, I was on the right track. I was like, "Oh, it's one of these," and I am down. I am down for this. And then even more so, we get the traditional car crash. Though I got to give it props. A rabbit is underused compared to animals that run across the street to force people to crash. You don't run across too many rabbit car deaths.
Right? Big white rabbits too.
Yeah, big white rabbit. Feed your head and all that, But that was that was our cold open. That was the pre-credits, and that was immediately a tone setter for me, just because I was like, oh, this is just I can't wait for the delights that this movie is going to show me. Right off the bat, Kathy, I picture one day a lurid tryst when she gets older. I picture a lurid tryst with her and maybe Bob from House by the Cemetery. I just that's the level of punchability of Kathy. Even before the possession happens, I'm like going, oh, this is gonna be a problem child. This child is not. This child ain't gonna give a damn about her mother's mental illness. Oh, and yeah, that's one thing we have to point out in the beginning of this movie. It's established that the mother is suffering from heavy depression owing to having a miscarriage.
Yes.
Yeah, and they decide, and her husband, George, I'm going to say another thing, is one of the most useless horror dads since the father in Orphan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, everything he does is counterproductive, selfish, and even when he shows up at the tail end of the movie, contributes nothing to the scene, except that the next day he's going to have to buy another window.
Yep, that's it. That's and yeah, that just there's so much to say about that scene in the spoiler sequel of our conversation. But
yeah,
he's absolutely ineffective at anything at any point.
Yeah.
And just I've never seen anybody so ready to just brush off anything that happens. As a person who deals with depression and anxiety and PTSD, I envy his ability to go, meh, okay, I'm going back to work.
Yeah,
that's a superpower.
Well, superpower for him, but it doesn't work for everyone else. This guy, proudly says, I go to work for 18 hours a day. I'm like, and yet this guy is able to brush off work. And we're getting way too into the spoilers here. We'll get into it a little bit later. But suffice to say, George, we'll get there. But suffice to say, George is the woefully oblivious dad, which is funny because he is, for all intents and purposes, the kid that was taken away by his mother.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you think he would play a more central role in the proceedings, but instead the spirit in question fixates upon the titular Kathy when she goes up to the attic and finds all of her junk, including a very ratty and very creepy ass doll, like the kind where even Stuart Gordon would say, no, get that out.
Yeah. I had to go out and find out for myself. There are 0 Cathy's Curse dolls on the market. There are no replicas. There are no toys. There's stills from the movie, and that's it. Nobody has tried recreating this doll. No, I mean, granted, this is 77, so movie memorabilia as merchandise, that kind of thing, happened that year. But so
and in lieu of those enterprising replica makers like the wonderful Horror Business Masks, there's still got to be a market for making a replica of something something. And I don't see people we will do our best to try to get people to love this movie enough to create the demand. We have to create the demand. That's our problem. We got to create that demand. So it sounds like we're already like condemning the movie, but no, this is one of those ones where I will say another thing I have to say is the mother Vivian. Now, with this director, this being his English language debut, there could also have been just kind of a loss in translation aspect to his direction. Perhaps because he'd never really directed English speaking before, he probably just assumed that this was the way actors should sound in English speaking cinema. Because Vivian's performance, I would never have gotten depression from her performance. I would have just thought full-blown schizophrenia the way she was directed.
I agree with you entirely. And aphasia, maybe, because of the way her sentences break. It was just like you're just waiting for her to go line over and over and over again. The one that stuck out with me the most is she's had one of her spells as she's trying to say, I saw her face in the window. And she goes, I saw her face in the wind. 2, 3, 4, go.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it's just like, is she okay? I mean, is the actress okay?
It's like, did you change her batteries this morning?
Yeah.
So, there's one point, and I think it was in that scene, she started sounding like Kirk Cameron's sister from A Little Piece of Heaven. It's like, oh, there's a deep cut. So wonderfully awkward. And I don't know if this actress, if she just naturally, that was just her natural ability, or if that's just she's acting the way she was directed. But the Golden Globes missed out. Award season missed out.
I want to believe that it was a problem with the direction. At the same time, that there's got to be a point where she would go, okay, wait, seriously, what you want me to sound like? What? Come on, I want to know what kind of fight back may or may not have happened on that set, because I don't know. But it does make it feel very giallo.
Yes, actually, I was getting a lot of heavy giallo vibes, and I don't know if it was just intentional, or again, European director, so he might have just brought a lot of European filmmaking sensibilities to it, so that's why I did feel very giallo-like. Now, actually, there are some aspects I will give credit to. Firstly, I did actually really feel the sound editing was especially good. They really picked and choose and did a lot of really interesting effects when it came to voice, the demonic voices, or even just a lot of the haunted house noises that would accompany it. Those were surprisingly effective. And I actually did think the music wed pretty well with that. So whenever it wanted to be a little moody, whenever one wanted to be moody or try to sell what atmosphere they could, it was definitely not lackluster on the sound department. And I will say, in levels of story progression, you don't expect to see a little girl try to poke out another child's eyes just because they're playing Car Crash.
It's hard also not to make comparisons to Omen. The thing is, it makes sense that we never get a moment where Damien is likable in the Omen. You never really connect to, oh, okay, what a sweet little boy. You never get that moment because you're not supposed to, because that character was, conceived in evil and brought forward. So that makes sense. But with Cathy, it's all supposed to go downhill once she finds the doll. But she starts acting oddly the moment they first show up to the house. Yeah. And just I'm going to go to my room. And she goes upstairs and goes straight to Laura's room. But they just, oh, okay, she's going to room. Anyway, let's go do our thing. It's like, you haven't even seen the upstairs yet. But you never get that moment with her where you get that sense of likable, normal, sweet little girl. Ever. They never set that up. So I think it steals a lot from the development of her possession.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that I find problem with, oddly enough, in The Shining, is that Nicholson's half around the axle before you get to the Overlook.
Yeah.
And so that progression into madness isn't really, we don't get that benefit.
But one thing, at least, that The Shining didn't waste time, or at least was able to handle better, is expository dialogue. Because in Cathy's Curse, oh man, nothing cracked me up more than when George walks in and says, "This is the house. Here's the chair. Here's the couch. Here's the chaise lounge. Here's the soap basket." I'm like, who is this for? And I'm pretty sure these individuals know what all this shit looks like.
I have to wonder if the director was just showing off that he just learned all these English words for things, which would also explain why he picks up a book and goes, "The bookshelf." Like, that's a cardboard box, my guy. That's not a bookshelf. It's just a cardboard box with a book on top.
It's so I can't even for the life of me begin to figure out, if this was like a first draft script, or maybe it was just something where, I mean, because I don't know anyone who in real life would take the time to introduce the chair.
Yeah. Or they make a point of pointing out that chair during that little monologue, rather. And then that same chair is in Laura's bedroom upstairs.
Yeah.
So it's like, this chair is so nice, we had to use it twice,
Yeah.
But yeah, the exposition is ham-fisted in this movie, and still does not accomplish its job in any way, shape, or form.
Not at all. And actually, that cracks me up because there are times where I was like, okay, that over-explaining you were doing for the furniture, can you please apply that to where the fuck this Doberman came from? I did not know that it was their caretakers until like a little while afterwards when someone said, "Oh, that's his dog," and I'm like,
"Yeah,
can we please?"
I don't know what's up with the dog. He said it was the pick of the litter. Who said pick of the litter? What litter? When did this dog come into the picture? Yeah,
all right.
And yet it's supposed to be an important character.
Yeah. And it is. And we'll have to get into it more because it seems like we are kind of dipping our toes into the spoiler pool. You can kind of see us laughing, or you kind of hear us laughing, having a grand old time with this. That is a good indicator that this movie is a delightful schlocksterpiece, as I said before, trashterpiece. This is definitely one that is pure bad movie viewing party delight, or live stream with your friends. That's the way you watch this. I mean, I would have loved to have heard Mike and the Bots, or Joel and the Bots, or Emily and the Bots riffing on this one. Who knows? They still could. Because frankly, I think this is right for it. Yeah, it's on Tubi. Definitely. If you want to come back, just go see it and then come back and join us for these spoilers after the jump.
She has the power to terrorize.
My daddy, my dolly, and me.
CATHY'S Curse.
All right. Aria, did you all take your time to enjoy Cathy's Curse? You better have enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did enjoy it and want to hear what we think, because otherwise you wouldn't have come back. There's some point you're probably like, "Oh, those assholes." And this is only the second episode of this guy's podcast. I'm not following him out of that.
You liked it, and y'all know it.
Yes, you liked it, you know it. And if you didn't like it, you're just not on the right mindset, dude. You got to change you got to swap your channels, man.
Helps if you're in Colorado or Washington State.
All right, so we are now in the spoiler corner of Cathy's Curse, and oh boy, I got things. Firstly, there's at one point where in early on where Cathy makes the acquaintance of a bunch of kids, and they're like, "Someone's watching," or actually, no, what was it? Vivi was like, "Someone's watching us." Turned out to be a bunch of neighborhood kids who, I guess, are voyeurs in training, but most parents, would say, get out of here, you kids, get off. No, George invites them in.
Well, and the reason George does this is because George's job for this entire film is to convince his wife that she's overreacting to everything.
Mm-hmm.
So not only that she's simultaneously, yes, she's insane, and simultaneously, well, no, it's just you're making things up, you're silly. Well, I'm having this problem. I'm really struggling. Well, that's fine, dear. The doctor says it's nothing. He wants to gaslight both sides of that argument. And I'm good on him, I guess, for undertaking the impossible dream or something. I don't know where he's going. But yeah, that's like, see, you're afraid of kids. Aren't you dumb? That's the vibe I get off of George, kind of in general.
And then it turns out the kids are working for Fagin and they stole him blind. It's like, no, that didn't happen. I wish it did, though. Any excuse to have the song Pick a Pocket or Two in my head, that's fine. But but yeah, and even more so, they thrust Kathy upon these kids. And like, what if these kids don't want to be Kathy's friend? They definitely don't want to after Kathy decides to have them, let's play Car Crash and recreate the whole scenario in South Park Kids form with a cardboard car. And let's say, no, you got to do it like this. Oh, but you have to be missing an eye. Pulls out a freaking segment of a wire hanger, I'm assuming, and off-screen jabs her in the eye. And there's a part of me going, did they actually do this? I have a feeling this would be that kind of movie. Right? They did not. There was a poke, but no, nothing else from there. But the house is presided over by two caretakers. Well, one's a maid, the other one is the I guess the groundskeeper or something like that.
Maintenance man, kind of odd job guy.
Yeah, he's the one who owns the Doberman and spends many portions of the movie getting completely faced. I admit there was a point when they actually leave this guy with Kathy, and I'm making a lot of musical references here, but my brain immediately goes, yeah, do you think it's all right?
Yep.
Leaving
that was my thought too.
Kathy with the cake. Yeah. I was worried about that, but fortunately by that point, Kathy has become so fully possessed by Aunt Laura that there's just this one wild scene where they're sitting in the kitchen opposite each other, and snakes and spiders and rats just show up, and he doesn't do anything.
I kept watching it like, did they get a mannequin for this shot? It's like, no, he's there.
No, he's doing it.
I think he's just so absolutely terrified as the actor himself. The actor is just so terrified that he doesn't want to move. He's gone catatonic for fear of getting nipped at by something. I love the fact that the snakes push open the drawer.
Snakes are very impressive creatures. But even then, they didn't pick like actual intimidating snakes. They picked like one of the most adorable looking snakes I've ever seen that actually like is looking at with these big sad eyes like, Mister, you don't have to be afraid of me, mister. I'm serious. Yeah. You watch that snake and I'm like, this snake's harmless. And then of course, one solitary tarantula coming in. And if anything to be said about tarantulas, everyone pretty much knows at this point, they're not the way Fulci portrayed them.
Correct. One of the things I find astounding about this particular scene is the fact that, talking out of school here, I am actually arachnophobic and aphidiophobic. I am terribly afraid of spiders and snakes both. And this is one of the least frightening scenes involving either that I have ever seen in cinema history. It didn't make me crawl watching these things crawl on him, which just, first of all, the tarantula teleports. You see him on the arm and he walks up to the neck. And then the very next shot, he's down on the wrist. The spider's down on the wrist crawling towards his hand.
I have a suspicion that they were trying to edit it in a way to make us think that there's multiple spiders. Because
that's a great idea, but you don't wide shot and show that the other spider isn't there.
Yeah. You don't. I'm pretty sure they only had it in the budget to have one spider and probably a spider wrangler, and he probably wasn't even a great spider wrangler. So what does it achieve? I mean, is the caretaker now in Kathy's thrall? I mean, he seemed against her even after that moment. And there's even just random bits where he just lunges at her like, you gotta kill the doll. Just jumps at her in the side, you gotta kill the doll. And randomly gets cut by the doll. I guess the doll's like going, I cut you, man. Would have loved the doll.
We never see how the doll managed to slice his palm open. You never see a claw or a tooth or a weapon or nothing. It's just suddenly slice. And then they get the slice wrong, right? And then they get the slightly reference wrong later because he's sitting there at another dinner with her later in the movie, just kind of staring across at her. And he looks at her and he looks at his left hand. And you see him move the fingers to check it and close it again and look back at her like you'll bet she cut. But it's the other hand that had the cut. I want to say they cut things out of order, and when they put them back together, it didn't pay off. But I don't give them credit for having that kind of assembly skills for the editing in this movie.
Yeah. Or even if they
on the subject,
I would even debate if they even had someone on continuity on this movie.
I don't believe so at all.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's some beautiful things where you almost had great moments in this film. And one of the ones for me that stands out, we have to talk about taking mommy breakfast. So George, with all the help from the 8-year-old daughter, mind you, how to do things like hard things like find the frying pan and where's the parsley. Now what he's cooking, I have no idea, because the breakfast is already on mommy's tray. And she decides she's going to carry the tray up to mommy so mommy's got her food while dad cooks invisible meal number 2. And you go up there, and for whatever reason, she stares back at the recurring attic door. A light comes on in the attic door, and then she turns and stares into the camera like she does about 20 times in this film. And they do the kind of cool lighting effect where the spotlight her eyes kind of thing, she stares. Mm-hmm. And they do this time lapse shot of the breakfast rotting on the tray.
Yeah.
The sandwich molds over, there's maggots everywhere. The apple that's very prominent on the tray has gone black, and because obvious time lapse kind of thing, and it's supposed to be her cursing the breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Then she walks into her mom's room to deliver the tray. The food's fine. They set down the food on the tray, and it never pays off.
No, never. I was expecting her to wake up, look at the food, and freak out because it's all rotted. That's
how that should have gone.
Yeah,
but it didn't.
It didn't. And also the thing I was more interested in is they were cooking eggs, and yet afterwards they're going, I want to go to bed. And I was like, dude, were you just making breakfast?
The whole thing reads as breakfast. And no, suddenly it's like, well, time to go to bed. And just like you're tired now, Kat. Oh, like she's listened to anything else you've had to say this movie. You're going to convince her she's tired now by willpower alone.
Speaking of things that don't really pan out, even though I will say there is some good stuff around it, Agatha the medium, who is introduced by one of the neighbors who is a friend of that neighbor. And again, that wonderful expository dialogue, she's a medium. Yes, I'm a medium. It was like, even though the dialogue,
that's a conversation you have in the 70s the first time you meet somebody.
Yeah. Well, there's a nice bit of dialogue even beforehand that actually gives a good, clear indication. Okay, this person's very clearly some form of psychic or empath or something like that. That's where we're going at with this character. And she seemed like she was going to be the prime mover on the positive side, like try to help save the day. Or we thought that she was going to be the Lin Shaye of this whole thing. But but there's one pretty effective bit where she actually sneaks into the house, confronts Cathy, and I keep forgetting the caretaker's name. I don't remember the caretaker's name. Paul. Okay. And Paul actually, almost as if like he's being like puppeteered by Cathy, are verbally accosting her and saying some pretty horrific stuff. And I will say this, I do love it when I eat, whether the kid's good or bad as an actor or not, I love it, especially in a horror film, when they commit to the bad child being a bad child and they don't water them down by not having them spout obscenity. You're like saying, oh, we can have our child killing people. I just don't want him to say that word. But no, in this movie, they've got this child saying shit, bitch. The subtitles on my Tubi had them dropping the bad F-bomb, not fuck, the other F-bomb. But I could tell it's like, oh, fat. They're just saying fat, not saying the other thing. But even so, I wouldn't have put it past it for this movie to say that. I would have been like, damn.
And I do like that. I do love the fact when you let the evil kid be a bad kid. Yeah. And she does it. And also the other thing too is that when they allow them to swear convincingly. Yeah. And not clumsily and purposely misusing the words, like, they really laid into that. And that's fantastic. I do dig it.
Yeah. But then after that moment, now I thought they were going to kill Agatha, but no, she just runs out and we never see her again.
Such a waste of that character.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, she could have been, she could have been the insidious Lynch medium character that could have been like, honestly, the thing that could have saved Vivian, during
Mhm.
her whole stupor. I mean, she, even the climax. Well, the climax of the movie cracks me up because it all amounts to Kathy being, very clearly making merry with the beef jerky, because that's what her face looks like. It's like, it's a good thing the
I love
dog
that.
wasn't. It's a good thing the dog wasn't on set, because the dog would probably be rushing her to licking it off.
I love the fact that the burn effect they applied to her, which really just looked like somebody spray painted an avocado and blew it up. Um, that the burn effect on it was so obviously so thick and over applied that it impaired her speech, so she barely got out the "My name is Laura" line, which should have
Yeah,
been such a payoff kind of a moment. That you should have
yeah,
so much force behind that line, but she could barely talk, so she just kind of gets, "My name is Laura," and that's it. And so it becomes just a bad, uh, McCarthy doll kind of a thing.
which,
Um,
this definitely goes to what the sound editing, why the sound editing was able to pick up the slack that the on camera was unable to pull. I think, like, my major bewilderment with the nature of the paranormal phenomenon this is that this is the ghost of Laura, but it seemed to me that the father was much more vengeful and spiteful. It's honestly, I would have been more I think it would have been more clear if this was the vengeful spirit of the father, and that maybe Laura, who, may have, well, they never actually answer, why did the mother leave Laura behind?
never do we get a single bit of why on that. We have
Yeah,
no idea why she took the boy and ran and left
yeah.
the 8-year-old daughter there with the
It's like,
misogynistic father.
yeah, it seems to me like if you're wanting to escape a puritanical, misogynist, abusive husband, you're going to want to take the child who might wind up being the embodiment of everything he hates. It's like,
Yep.
you're going to you're going to wind up with a deadly friend scenario here, minus the yellow robot. So,
Yeah, that's really it. That's what struck me too. And you could almost save this plot, and just to the point you just made, you could almost save this plot if George had been the one that was twisted and kind of took on the
mhm,
father's whole thing, and that I think would have been a far more interesting story, because Laura never
yeah,
had the opportunity to develop that misogyny. She
yeah,
was just an abandoned little girl, dies a few minutes later in a car crash. This is the exposure to Dad's "all women are bitches" speech that he's making,
yeah.
and
And
she never has the time to develop that. She's already dead. So why would that be the thrust of the haunting?
yeah, I feel like, and the things that we're kind of dishing out here, I feel like this is why I actually will say I'm not averse to remakes. I'm not. It's because if you're going to do a remake, and at least be passionate about the idea of remaking it, and be passionate about the fact that you might actually have an idea that may be applied towards making this idea something more interesting. We right now have just come up with the ways we can adjust the story to make it interesting, and in turn make it a pretty much a full-blown indictment of parental grooming.
Truth, absolutely.
That would perfectly encapsulate why George is such a useless character, why he insists on gaslighting. It
Mm-hmm.
would even be creepier as to why it would, instead of it being Laura's ghost, be the father's ghost, or it would be the grandfather's ghost possessing, and what would
Mm-hmm.
be more horrifying than the notion of the ghost of an abusive misogynist asshole possessing the daughter? I mean, that'd be terrifying right there.
Yep.
So, yeah, I feel like, honestly, I think it's another reason I want people to see this, just because I want some enterprising individual to look at this and go, that's because there's the seedlings of great ideas in here that
Yeah,
I
I
feel
agree.
really could. Yeah, there's boring bad, and then there's, did anyone have any coherent vision bad? And that's what this one falls into, and those are way more fun
Yeah.
because it gets your wheels turning as to what the hell the set was like.
Allen, yes, Randy Allen. This was her first and last film. She didn't do any acting after
Yeah.
this as Kathy. And I'd love to know if this film was why, if her experiences on this were part of that decision.
Yeah.
But I would love to have known what she was like as a little girl, since we never got to see Kathy. You know, we get to see Kathy become Laura, but that's really it. The one thing I want to mention real quick, I know we're almost out of time.
Yes.
We mentioned editing. My favorite part of the whole movie is when Paul sees the mother freak out and goes to check on Laura, already panicking. Oh, sorry, check on Kathy. They've got me doing it now. He goes and he's trying to Kathy, are you okay? Kathy, he's pounding on the door. The door opens by accident. You see him reach, pull the door closed again, and then continue pounding on it, trying to get in.
I did see. Well, yeah, I saw that too, but I was questioning. I was like, is that the ghosts like pushing the door back? Like, are the spirits stopping him from opening the door? Because I've seen that happen a couple times where they open the door and then the door like slams in their face, and then they're like,
Paul reaches for it.
Yeah,
this is a shot that could have been saved by a piece of white thread, or just somebody hiding behind the door and pushing the door closed. This would have saved that scene. But if that's the effect they were going for, Paul needed to not reach for the door to close it.
Yeah. Speaking of doors spiritually opening, closing, actually one bit that I did think was especially effective was when Vivian's trying to get into the house around the tail end, and there's like this whole symphony of closing windows and closing doors.
Yes.
Right there. I mean, that whole bit was effective. That little bit was effective. There's little bits where I feel like they had a good grasp on what they wanted to do. Even when the maid gets killed. Oh yeah, but the maid gets killed, by the way. That bit, for as awkward as the dialogue is that leads up to it, just the image of Kathy raising the doll and just kind of pushing, and then ultimately cutting to the exterior and seeing the maid fall to her death from a one-story window.
It's all for you, Kathy. It's all for you.
She's old. Oh, I'm sorry. If Alex DeLarge can survive a one-story drop onto a concrete, I think he'll be fine. But
right.
And I love the nondescript way how Paul died. We have no idea how truly she killed Paul. All we know is that we see his laid out corpse on the snowy bank. His face looking like he just dunked his face into a can of Chef Boyardee.
Yep. He spilled his ravioli. That's all that happened to him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I ate a full can of Chef Boyardee, I'd die. Hey, we wouldn't, because our whole childhood was fueled by Chef Boyardee. We became immune to it. Yes,
Chef Boyardee and spite.
Yes. So, but I love how as we mentioned prior, or we alluded to it, George has talked about the fact that he is a compulsive workaholic. He apparently is I guess he's an architect, and I guess they need him on location for like 18 hours a day, which is not possible. I don't care how much of a workaholic you are. No job would ever allow you to work that much overtime.
Especially on a live construction site, which they confirm it is.
Especially. But I love that, you're all thinking like, okay, is this going to come a time when the husband's actually going to come in and actually like contribute something? No, we have a little shot of, no one's picking up the phone. Hey, I'm out. Leaves, and then does the banging on the door, smashed in the window, but pretty much right when he could have contributed something, the mother, oh, fuck off, I don't need you, poked out the eyes of the doll, and that was enough. The way they were talking about burning it, I was like, shouldn't we burn this thing?
There are so many film established ways on getting rid of creepy dolls. It takes some doing typically, but there's ways you can do it that are accepted storytelling methods, and this does none of them. We don't get why the doll is. We don't really get why the doll was important
in that initial crash. I mean, I didn't see. I mean, it could have been that Laura was holding the doll, and then it got thrown from the crash, like when the crash happened. That could be it. I mean, I've heard of the notion of spirits kind of latching onto a totem of something that they loved in life. I mean, there's so many screenwriting outs that you can have to justify this idea. Yeah,
which would have taken at tops 20 seconds of screen time.
20 seconds, 20 seconds worth.
And
but
if you didn't want to set it up, you do what they did with the entire opening act and just do expository dialogue. You know, it would have been on par for that whole act. But yeah, it's making the doll important for some reason other than Kathy found the doll in the attic. You know, give us something about why the doll was significant to Laura.
Yeah, among all these other things, which look like they were pretty damn well haunted. I mean, even the portrait of Laura, which this may be because I'm an Orlandian and I go to Disney all the time, but you could see the little lights in the eyes. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was like, oh, that bitch is gonna light up. That little bastard's gonna light up at some point. It'll look cool, but I know it's coming. And it did. And yeah, it did look cool.
Yeah. And that's where we get our poster too.
Yeah. And
it's from that shot. Honestly, deservingly.
I'm not gonna lie, when you recommended this movie to me and I looked it up on IMDb and I saw that poster, I was like, and not knowing anything about the movie, you didn't tell me anything. Bless you. I saw that poster and I was like, ooh, this could be creepy. This could be really creepy.
And it should.
It should have been. But as it is definitely a underdeveloped, highly entertainingly underdeveloped souffle of a film. Definitely one with all the ingredients, but much like any souffle, pretty much deflates by the time you take it out of the oven. And I don't know. I don't make souffles. My only exposure to souffles is Dr. Who. But nevertheless, I am very happy that this movie exists, and I am very happy to have taken the time to extend awareness of it. Again, this is on Tubi. I would strongly advise get your friends together and watch this one. You will have a grand old time just for the schlockfest that it is, and it's beautiful for it. I mean, this is one I could picture even John Waters watching in viewing parties and having a great time with it. So
yeah, it's popcorn fare in the best sense.
So closing all right, what are your closing thoughts?
I feel vindicated. We get to expose this movie to the world and expose the world to this movie more specifically. I talk a lot of trash about this film and it deserves it, but at the same time, I also feel it deserves the attention that it doesn't get. Like we talked about here too, I really do feel that it was this close to being a fantastic story. I just think that there is some awkwardness in the writing and directing, particularly in the dialogue, that really got in the way, and then a lot of great setups just never pay off. But it's still it's a fun trip to take.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, an incredibly fun trip to take. And as I've said before, we have all these ideas that we could switch around to make this a good one. But sometimes I'm just more delighted when I find one that fails on a way that's like uniquely its own, because then it's not so much a failure, because ultimately the movie sets out to do what it set out to do, and that's to entertain the hell out of me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that. I mean, any movie that gets you talking about it has done something well. You know, it's put itself in your mind. And like I said, I saw this movie in a theater in probably 80, 81. And 2023, I'm talking about this film still.
Start up a new feature on my TikTok where I talk about great double features, like pairings of movies pinned together. I would happily put this one probably in a great double feature with Bloody Birthday.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be great,
because that one also has kind of a half-baked reason why the kids are evil, and yet in lieu of that, it's still a damn entertaining film. So I actually would say, for all of you at home, if you want to watch this, watch it with a double feature with Bloody Birthday. And I think you might have a grand old time just with kids behaving badly. Anyway, so to wrap up, Ruby, go ahead and tell us all your socials. Where can we find you?
Okay, you can find me all over the place at Ruby Tombsday, RUBYTOMBSDAY. Predominantly on Twitter, but you can also find me on Instagram and Slasher with that same spelling. I am also on Letterboxd. I am also, of course, on my new show that's going to be scener.com. /@RubyTomsday. Yes, the @ is actually part of the URL. That confused me too. The show is free, so you can stop in. We're going to do 10 p.m. Eastern every Saturday night, and then probably additional shows as bonuses elsewhere. So you can keep track of what I'm going to be showing on any of those socials.
I strongly recommend it, everybody. Ruby Saturday night get-togethers are a thorough delight, and there's always a surprise around every turn. She's had some incredible guests show up on the show. I'll still say one of my tops was when you did Scare Package 2 and you had Kelly Maroney pop up on it. That was a
highlight
joy
of my life.
That was
a
amazing.
Great night.
That was an amazing night, and I was glad I was there for the whole thing. And of course, poor Jeremy King trying to log in. But suffice to say, I'm really happy you found this new platform that you're able to keep the show alive. So for all of you, please seek out Ruby Tombsday. As I've said before, as happy as we are to still have people like Svengoolie and Joe Bob Briggs, we do need to keep looking to the future and looking for the future of the next horror host. Personally, I think Ruby is the future of horror hosting. So
that's
especially you're very welcome. And for myself, you can also find me on Twitter, Narcotic Casser 1, or just search out Narcotic Casserole. Find Narcotic Casserole also on TikTok as well. That's where you'll actually find most of my 3-minute recommendations, also just any little frolics I have going on there. And yes, I do still periodically poke my head in on YouTube as well. But in the meantime, everyone, thank you for joining us. And just remember, if you're curious about horror, just ask yourself, what's in the podcast?